What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Blue Collar Growth Network podcast. I'm your host, Chance Richardson, and today it's going to be a solo episode, and I'm going to be talking about one of the things that changed not only my business but my life, and that is a $20,000 mistake that I made about the end of 2024 going into 2025. We're about a little over a year removed from that happening, and I'm just going to kind of go into a little bit about what happened and then some lessons that I learned from that. In business, we're always going to make mistakes. There's going to be issues that come up, and it's about how you handle those mistakes and how you get through them and what you learn from them that really makes you a better business owner. And I know a lot of times with contractors and with just blue collar businesses in general, there can be things that happen on the job site because you're going into people's homes, and there's things that can happen at those homes. People are very particular about their homes, and they're very particular about the way things are done in their homes, and sometimes that can lead to different things like lawsuits or maybe expectations that were too much that might not have been met, or just, in general, just complaints. And so I know that a lot of blue collar businesses can relate to this. You think that you're going to make a certain amount on a project, and it just doesn't go through like that. And sometimes you have to end up coming out of pocket. And that's why I think that the first thing that I learned that's very important is to set expectations and make sure that you have those expectations in writing. But first, before I get into that, let me just tell y'all a little bit about what happened to this situation to where I lost $20,000. And the mistake was actually a $20,000 plus mistake, but there was some things involved to where it just got down to I had to pay back out of pocket $20,000. And let me just give y'all a brief overview of what happened. And obviously, this is I'm not talking bad about any of the parties involved. And I am looking back on it, I'm thankful that this happened because it did change a lot about my business. It changed a lot about my life and just how I operate in general. Basically, I do a white label services for other marketing companies. We handle white label stuff for different marketing companies, and there was one particular company that I was working for. They had a client that I was doing Google ads for. It started with this third party client, and basically I was doing white label Google ads for another agency, and we were working with their client. Well, this client only had, a handful of locations at that time that we were running ads for. And as the year and a half, 2 years, however long it was that we were running ads for them, they had doubled, tripled the amount of ads that they were running. So basically what was going on is they were going to hire in a in-house marketing person to run their Google ads, and we were going to switch everything over, kind of show that person around, train them up a little bit, get them familiar with Google ads, and then just be out of it. Well, I've ran ads myself for over 6 or 7 years, somewhere around there. Full time, 5 years, 5.5 years I've been running them, and maybe a little longer, maybe like 8, 9 years I've been running them for local businesses. But this is the only time that I've ever had a major overspend like this. You might go over $10, $20, something like that here or there. Sometimes you're under. It's just the way that Google Ads works. It's kind of hard to just hit that nail right on the head because of the way that they charge. But basically what was going on is we were transitioning over to this new company. I had all the ad accounts on ad accounts that I've created. So everything was kind of in my possession at this time whenever this happened. But the ads were charged to the client's credit card. And these ads were charging anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 a day, basically, because the budget was set for $1,500, and it can spend up to double that amount. So some days they were getting hit with 15, 18, 3,000. There wasn't very many days where it hit under 1,500, but this happened in the span of a couple of weeks. It was around the holidays, toward the end of the year, Thanksgiving, and before Christmas. It happened like toward the end of toward the end of November, early December, whenever we found out. But usually I would keep a better eye on what was going on with the ads, but we were doing transition, and so I just kind of was letting the ads do their thing because we were in the middle of transitioning everything over. I was working with the person to transition everything over, and I was meeting with them, once or twice a week here, during the transition. And basically what happened was the ads were charging $1,500 to $3,000 per day, which was $1,500 was their budget for the whole month. So whenever the ads were created, I put it in. I had a sheet. I saw 1,500, put 1,500 in there. I knew that, looking back at it, I knew that definitely wasn't what they wanted. That they wanted the monthly ad spend of 1,500. So I basically messed up. I think I put in the wrong amount. Looking back, I still don't know how I done it. The timestamp on it isn't a time that I would normally be doing Google ads. So I don't know if maybe one morning I hopped on there a little earlier than normal and was messing around with some stuff. But basically this went from me managing, 3 or 4 accounts for a certain price to me managing 15, 16 ad accounts plus more for the same price. So I basically, nothing was in writing. It was all a handshake deal. And I was working, basically the way that we found this out was I was working with the person that we were transitioning everything over to. And before we started that morning, she said, "Hey, our credit card, which had been getting hit for about 2 weeks, our credit card has been getting hit with a lot of Google ads. Money's coming out way more than what we would normally spend in a month, which their overall ad budget was, around $1,000 to $1,500 per location. You got 16, 17 locations, something like that. So it was a pretty big budget, and we were usually coming in under budget on all of those. We wasn't spending that much on all of those, but we were getting pretty close. So, the amount that came out overall wasn't that insane, but we did have about a $28,000 overspend. Actually, I think it was $29,000 overspend, and then they kind of gave us credit for $3,000 of that, which dropped it down to about 26. The other company that I was working with, they took the brunt of the $6,000, and basically I paid $20,000 out of my pocket. I didn't benefit anything from it. Didn't keep the ads, and I know, this is just looking back at it. I know that there's no way that it spent that amount of money and they didn't get any business off of it. We didn't get any credit for that. Didn't get the miles, the points, or any of that stuff from the credit card. All I got to do was hand over a $20,000 check, basically, which we didn't write at the whole time. Luckily, I was able to pay it back over time thanks to the being able to go get a huge chunk of it, or a chunk of it up front, and then be able to pay the rest over time. So it wasn't like a $20,000 in 1 month expense out of my pocket. But basically, they said that was coming out of their account, and I start digging, and I see, after a while, I start digging into the multiple accounts, and I see that there is this charge for this amount of money, and I'm thinking automatically like there's some mistake, something has happened, someone's gotten into the ads, maybe hacked it, something like that. And then the next thought is, okay, what do we do about it? So as soon as I see it, I'm like, man, excuse me, I have to go to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom, and almost passed out seeing that number right there, and then just trying to figure out, okay, what happened, what could have happened, how do we make it right? Just all those thoughts start going through my head, and that's basically what happened. We end up negotiating, figuring out the numbers, getting everything situated, and over the course of almost a year, getting everything paid back, and just moving on from that situation. And I'm grateful that it happened, because I do think that it forced me to grow in my business. It forced me to grow as a person. It just really was a blessing in disguise. It got me out of a situation that I really didn't 100% feel like, at the time it was great. Looking back at it, it probably wasn't the best situation for me to be in, and I was able to move from that situation and be able to kind of just get myself in and get my business in the situation that it needed to be in, rather than the one that I was in. And that's why I think the number one thing is just having the right expectations, and having those expectations in writing, what you're supposed to be doing for the money, what your obligations are, what your responsibilities are, and make sure that those are communicated across all parties, and that everyone agrees, and get signatures on what you're responsible for, what you're not responsible for. Because in that situation, just looking back at it, I feel like any other business owner that I do business with, my business myself, I think I would have noticed that amount of money coming out pretty quickly, and so would most of the businesses that I deal with. But at the end of the day, I should have been paying more attention to the ads. I should have been watching the ads. I should have made sure that stuff that wasn't happening. And the second thing kind of that I learned was to protect yourself with insurance. At that time, I didn't have any kind of E&O insurance. I didn't have any insurance that would help me in that situation. But I decided after that happened to get insurance, because just your general insurance, like if you have insurance where someone comes into your building, they slip and fall, and they sue you, like that kind of insurance doesn't cover actual mistakes usually. So getting the proper insurance, which only costs for $1 million policy, you're talking the price of not even taking out your family out to eat a month would cover. So just for a small amount of money a month, I could have avoided this. But you just don't know until you really get out there and you start looking into this stuff, because I never would have thought that something like that could happen. There's just felt like too many checks and balances that were in place to make sure that it didn't happen, and making sure that everything stayed the way that it was supposed to. I didn't know that anything like that would ever happen. That amount of money could be run up that quickly, but it definitely can. And it definitely can slip through the cracks on multiple levels. So make sure that you're insured, and that you are covered, and that you cover yourself on that. Something else that I learned is not to overextend yourself. I was very overextended. And then the next point will kind of go into why I was overextended. But I overextended myself. I was taking on too much. It was like things were moving fast, and instead of delaying the process, it was like, okay, can we add this new account? Can we add this new account? Can we add this new account? Yep, let's add it. Let's add it. So then we'd add it, run ads for it, and just really not wanting to admit that, hey, this is quite a bit of stuff here. So let's just, either reevaluate what's going on. Let's slow down, get a game plan together, maybe bring in some more help doing that kind of stuff instead of me just trying to take it all and trying to make sure that things were getting done the way that they were expecting. And whenever you overextend yourself like that, there's going to be things that fall through the cracks. There's going to be things that you're not going to perform at your optimum level because you're just taking on too much, and there's not enough bandwidth, there's not enough time, there's not enough energy to be able to keep up with a lot of the things. Because on top of those all those accounts, we're also having Google business pages that we were working on. We were having that, this company was just growing faster than we had the capability to really keep up with, honestly. So, looking back at it, there's a lot of things that I wish I would have done differently, conversations that I should have had that I didn't. And overall, I just think that I was overextended. And one of the reasons why I was overextended was I wasn't charging what I was worth. I wasn't charging what the service was worth. I was charging basically what I should have been charging for one account. I was charging for all the accounts. So, that was, if you're looking at it, that should have been easily a $12,000 to $15,000 a month job, and I was doing it for a fraction of that, a tenth of that price. And it just didn't. It was not a smart business decision. It was not a smart thing for me a situation for me to be in. And like I said, no shade, no bad feelings toward any of the business owners involved, any of the businesses involved. I think that this was a learning situation for everybody. I think that it was a good thing for everybody to learn from. And I think that probably every business that's involved in this situation is better because of it. And, both of the companies that were involved, other than my company, all the respect in the world to them. And I know, they were looking out for their employees, their best interest. And I think that, I was just wanting everything to not fall on them, and because I felt like it was my mistake. It's things that I could have prevented, things that I should have done that I didn't do. And any grace that we got in that mistake, I appreciated. So I just think that, and I agreed to do the work for what I did the work for. The thing is that everything was moving so fast, and I was trying to just keep up with everything, that I never really stopped much to have that conversation. Like, hey, this financially, this just doesn't work out. I need to make more money so that maybe we can hire some more people. Maybe you guys hire some more people, whatever needed to be done, or just say, hey, this account has gotten way bigger than what I can handle. Just having that conversation could have helped it out a lot. But not having the money to be able to pay someone, that kind of caused a lot of the overextending and just not having those conversations that I should have had. And that's nobody's fault but my own. I mean, any business, if you can get someone to work for whatever price, if it works for you, most of the time the business isn't going to come to you and say, hey, you're doing a great job. Here's some more money. Or, hey, I noticed that you're taking on more. Here's some more money. That just usually don't happen in business. Usually they're going to, just like if you work a job, they're going to try to get the most for the cheapest price. That's just the name of the game, the nature of the beast. So, I definitely think charging what you're worth and making sure that you're pricing your services accordingly and thinking about things like your taxes, growth, uh, advertising, just everything that's involved with that. Just making sure that you are covering all that in your estimates, and like I was saying earlier with the insurance, just include all that into your business. Something else that I learned from this is business is business and personal is personal. You can have a personal relationship with people, and that does help whenever stuff like this happens. It helps tremendously, but at the end of the day, business is business and personal is personal. Someone can like you, someone can care for you, but they also have to make sure that financially that they're taken care of as well. So whenever something like this happens, having a relationship with the person makes a big difference. But at the end of the day, they're going to want to be made whole. They're going to want to be compensated. They're going to want to make sure that they don't take a loss, for the most part. And like I said, in this situation, the other agency was great. All the respect in the world and love for them. But, at the end of the day, it's like the business wanted to be made whole. I felt like it was my responsibility to make them whole. And I understand completely that business is business, personal is personal. I'm not in their finances, I'm not in their books, but I do know just from the size of the business, that's something that could have been written off. That's something that definitely would hurt a business like mine and the other agency, probably more than it would hurt the business. Plus, we had a long term relationship. Plus, we were under the overall ad spend budget across all locations. Even with this mistake, we were still under budget, what they had kind of planned out, or what we had been told that they can spend monthly on these. So, just looking at all that, and I didn't really expect anything to be done for free, but I appreciate everything that they did do, but I feel like they probably, if the situation was reversed, the roles were reversed, I would have definitely tried to extend myself more to help out with that kind of relationship. But the relationship was getting ready to kind of change, part ways, and they really still wanted me to do a lot of the training and stuff like that, and I just didn't. After seeing how everything was handled, I didn't really feel like that was a good position for me to be in, and a good place for me to be in. And just looking back, having over a year of time to kind of look back, think about it, and just really look at the lessons that was learned from it and the education like that. Paying that $20,000 wasn't the worst thing that could have happened to me. That paying that $20,000 was basically an education for me on how to run a better business, how to be a better person, and that's what I think. The biggest thing that I learned from this, and the thing that I'll take with me, and I've always tried to do this, but that was a huge test of this. What I learned really is always operate with integrity. And whenever you come into a situation like that, I had conversations with other business owners, with people that I trust, and people that that I value their advice a lot of times, and they told me to not pay it. They told me have them take you to court. But deep down, I felt like the right thing to do, and since it was my mistake, and even then they were like, well, it's gonna be it's there's so much stuff going on with it that um I could probably get away with it. There wasn't any contracts. There was just handshakes, and but I feel like my word, my integrity is worth way more than that $20,000, and I've made way more than the $20,000 off of just being from the lessons that I learned, just from those things that I've implemented, having even having procedures now that I didn't have back then, having processes that we do that I didn't have back then, and just being a better business owner and stuff. And I think operating with integrity and moving in a way that I can go to sleep at night and know that yes, I made a mistake, but I tried to do everything I could to make that mistake right, and to make that mistake not impact people the best way that I could with everything that I had. And I am thankful that over the years that I had that developed that kind of integrity, because when I was 19, 20 years old, for one, if I was in business at that age, that would have totally ruined everything with the mindset that I had. I would have quit. I would have moved on. I wouldn't have tried, building a business anymore. That would have been it. I would have just found something else to do, went and got a job. But over the years, just developing that grit and developing that, just knowing like, hey, this is just something that we have to get through, and I'm prepared more for stuff like that. If that stuff happens again, I would know, be more prepared. Which that's the only time that anything like that has ever happened, any kind of major overspend, and it hasn't happened since, didn't happen before, and never had any issues with it. And I know, looking back, I know the mistakes that I made. I know the things that I should have improved on. I know the conversations that I should have had that I didn't. And moving forward with that, I see those things in other scenarios, and I make sure that I have the conversations. I make sure that I am charging properly for my services so that I don't get overwhelmed, and so that I can hire the proper help whenever I need it. And I just think the biggest thing is the integrity issue, and making sure that you are able to lay your head down and sleep at night. And I feel like in this situation, I would have loved to have been able to just cut a huge check, or cut the whole 20,000, 26,000, whatever it may be. But at the time, I just wasn't able to make that check. And I know, a lot of business owners would have been in the same situation if something like that happened. And it's very hard to look back and know that, that I did lose that money. I didn't get anything at all for that money. The amount of money that I made on that whole account, barely, if it even covered that. So I basically did all that work for free, and had to pay them for that, for something that they did receive benefit from. And that was hard to accept, and that was hard to not fight. But at the end of the day, I know the mistake was mine, and I know that everyone isn't going to handle a situation the way that you would handle it. Everyone doesn't have the same process, doesn't have the same grace, doesn't have whatever it is. They have their own mindset and have their own things. But I overall, it was a hard experience to go through. 2025 was a very rough year for me mentally, just knowing that I made that mistake and having to get over it, and just be able to not be gun shy, or not be able to be have kind of a fear of creating the Google ads and running the ads. And for a couple of months, I was like, I just didn't. I felt like, a basketball player that missed the winning shot, and it's like I had to get back out there and shoot. But it was hard. It was hard to take those shots because having that failure just constantly playing back in your head. So it was hard to get through that and hard to get over that. But looking back and being on the other side of it is very empowering, and it's made me a stronger minded individual. It's made me just think about things in a totally different way. It's helped. And I reached out to a couple of people for help, and I think that they helped me the best way that they could. Obviously, that's a huge amount of money to just throw out there and not get anything in return from it. So, I understand everybody's the businesses that were involved in it. I understand their standpoint, I understand their views, and I understand why they operated the way that they operated in this situation. And I also know that overall, like I said earlier, it was a great experience. It wasn't a great experience, but it was a great learning experience, and it taught me a whole lot about what I was doing wrong and exposed a lot of things in my business. It is kind of scary thinking about, hey, is there something else that's going to be like this? That's going to slap me in the face, but you can't think like that. You just have to keep moving and just realize that we're all going to do the best that we can do, and we're learning as we're going. And there was things like with the insurance that taught me something that in the long run, who knows what that can save me in the future. And I might have not ever known about that or even thought about it if something like this didn't happen. So overall, very thankful that this happened to me, very thankful to be on the other side of it, and thankful for the grace that was shown by the other businesses in this situation. And I just think that whenever something bad like this happens, you just have to look at it and say, what can I learn from this? How can I prevent myself from doing it again? How can I make myself better from this situation? It's like going to the gym, lifting weights, and your body's hurting, your muscles are hurting, but that's, during that hurt is whenever you're recovering and those muscles are growing. So you have to go through some hurt to be able to get to where you want to be.